Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome to the August meeting of the Citizens Finance Advisory Committee. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Member Dorfman? Member Johnson?
Here.
Vice Chair Woody?
Here.
Chair Peck?
Here.
Quorum is established.
Are there any committee member announcements or presentations? I only have an announcement that I won't be here for the next meeting. I'll be on a trip for my 50th wedding anniversary, and Mr. Woody will be here to take over, so thank you. Report from the Finance Director, Director Conrad. Can you please give us an update?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. My biggest announcement for you all is that for the first time in 10 months, Administrative Services is fully staffed. So I'm very excited to introduce you to Megan Scottberg. She's our new accounting manager. She's on her second day with the city.
Be nice, huh?
Yes, be nice. We're very happy to have her join the team. She's coming to us with 10 years of experience working for San Luis Obispo County. She worked in, and jump in any time, but Public Services Department, right, where she did a lot of customer service for the public, including business licensing and TOT administration, among other things, I'm sure. And she proceeded to the Office of the Treasury, where she was involved in investments and many other aspects of accounting, and most recently came out of the Public Works Department. So if she's going to just say a quick hello.
Thank you, Emily, for that wonderful introduction. Hi, I just want to say hello and that I'm happy to be here. She's correct. I have worked at the county for over 10 years in various departments, and I'm excited to learn this side of local government and help in any way that I can.
The next announcement I have for you is a reminder of the Morro Bay's 60th anniversary of incorporation. You have in front of you flyers announcing the event, as well as a commemorative pin that was designed by our very own finance staff, Tori White. We will be having events over the course of 3 days, September 5th through September 7th, culminating in a parade on Saturday the 7th and Founders Day events and celebration. So everyone, please join in and help celebrate. I also wanted to update you on the Development Impact Nexus study and fee update. Staff put out an RFP last fall. We selected DTA as our consultant. We've been meeting with them every 4 weeks. Now we'll be coming to meet with them every 2 weeks. A draft report is anticipated in time for our October meeting with this body, and we would like to, at that time, bring you a draft report. Our goal is to implement the new fees as of January 1. That's going to depend on how progress continues. I also wanted to discuss our CFAC vacancy. We have one open position here, as you can see. Application period is open through October 30th. To date, we have not yet received any applications, so encourage your friends and neighbors. Lastly, a few ideas for our October meeting. Some potential items would be, of course, the Development Impact Fee study that I mentioned earlier. I want to also bring you an update on the capital needs assessment status, both citywide and I believe there's a harbor element. Public Works may have an item ready to bring you on the SRF WRF loan amendment and a financial strategy to get your feedback. And we'd also like to discuss with you an approach to budget development in terms of the timing and planning for next budget year. And that concludes my update.
Thank you. The next item we have is public comment. At this time, we have an opportunity for public comment. Members of the audience wishing to address the CFAC on city business matters not on the agenda may do so at this time. If you have comments on any agendized item, we prefer that you address them at the time of the report. However, if you are unable to stay for that item, you may also address those items at this time. Are there any comments from the public under general public comment? Seeing none, we can We can move on to the consent calendar. The only item on the consent calendar is the approval of minutes for May 21st. Are there any comments or modifications on the May 21 minutes? If not, is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Clerk, call the roll, please.
Member Johnson,
Yes.
Member Dorfman,
Yes.
Vice Chair Woody,
Yes.
Chair Peck.
Yes. Our next item is an informational item on local sales taxes from the city's sales tax consultant. When we were looking at items for this agenda, I thought we had an excellent presentation on this matter last year that was worthy of repeating. My own opinion is that sales tax revenue are the biggest single source of revenue the city has. By last year's budget, we took in about $7.2 million of combined Bradley, Burns, and Q&E sales taxes, which is about 40% more than any other single item. So understanding this source of revenue is an important judge of what can be funded out of Q&E and also other general fund item. So we have a presentation from HDL again today, and so Director Conrad, I'll let you introduce that item, please.
Excellent. So we have Ken Brown joining us remotely. Ken, are you there?
I am. Good afternoon. Let me just turn my camera on here. Great. Hopefully you can see me.
We can see you.
Fantastic.
Okay, I will open your presentation here, and you can just let me know when to proceed to the next slide.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We appreciate
Give
you
me
being
one
here.
second here.
Mhm.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. It's a real pleasure. Thank you. Let me just get myself set up here, and then we'll get going. All right. Well, welcome, or thank you for welcoming me. And again, real quick, my name is Ken Brown from HDL Companies, your sales tax consultant. And so I've got a brief presentation for you today that I believe will be responsive to some of the interests that you have and that you've expressed both to Emily and in previous meetings. And so with that, why don't we move on to the second slide and just really quickly a quick note about HDL. We've been serving communities for over 40 years. We represent and work with over 700 agencies now that include cities, but also counties and special districts. And we're really most pleased of all about our 99% client retention rate, which speaks a lot, I think, about the work we do with our clients. Now, I understand that there's a few important topics. I'm on slide number 3 now, and that you wanted to address today. And so I do have quite a few slides, about 25 or so. So I'm going to go through these fairly quick to make sure that I touch on the areas of interest that you have. So please, if I'm moving too fast or if you have a particular question or a point that you would like to make, please be sure to jump in. Either at the end or certainly during the presentation is fine with me as well. Or just let me know if I need to slow down a little bit as I try and make my way through all the material we have to cover today. But what my plan is to first do some quick housekeeping and touch on some basic background information related to sales tax that's necessary before I think we delve into some of the other topics we have to cover today. I'll include as part of that some information on the confidentiality requirements with sales tax, and also essentially a breakout of Morro Bay's sales tax rate and the composition of the city sales tax base as well. Then we'll finally get a chance to dive into a historical review of the city sales tax growth rate compared to the statewide trend, both on a cash basis, and then, of course, as inflation has been relatively hot in recent years, on a real after-inflation basis as well. Then we'll look at some of the major influences of sales tax growth over time and some of the reasons for the differences between sales tax growth within Morro Bay, also the district tax, the voter-approved district tax E20, and then the state overall. We'll compare the results for Morro Bay versus neighboring jurisdictions on a per capita basis. And then finally, we'll do a quick review of HDL's forecasting process and our outlook for the economy and these major industry groups. So on slide number 4, this is just really quickly wanted to mention that there is a state law that limits what we can talk about related to sales tax. Basically, how it works is you can't disclose any information that would reveal the reported sales tax or taxable activity of any business entity, nor any group of entities if it's small enough where you could actually get at business results for any particular entity. So there are some ways, there's some what we call the group of 4, gang of 4, where you can disclose that information for more businesses, and there's some other associated rules with that. But basically, this all falls under Revenue and Taxation Code Section 7056. If you want to look that up, that's basically outlines the confidentiality requirements for sales tax under state law. But with that, on page 5, slide 5, we see here the breakdown of the tax rate in Morro Bay. It's 8.75%. And so what you see up there is a box, a blue box, which is highlighting the city's portion of that. So most of this revenue, about 4%, goes to the state, and then the county gets about 2.25% of that, a little bit of that, which might find its way back to the city, but most of that is used for county-wide programs. And so basically what we're talking about when we look at sales tax is the 1% and the 1.5%, measure E20, which is the district tax. So all in, it's about 2.5% of that 8.75% that we're talking about that stays in Morro Bay. On slide 6, I did want to do a quick overview, a little hard to read here, but I'll give you the highlights of how is Morro Bay different than the statewide average jurisdiction within our database. And so, of course, as you might expect, Morro Bay is dominated as a world-class, well-known tourist destination dominated by restaurants and hotels, with about 27.8% of the sales tax base in Morro Bay derived from that restaurant and hotel category. And over on the other side, you can see for our average agency in the state, only about 12.8% of sales tax across the typical agency is derived from that particular category. And similarly, fuel and service stations, 18% of the tax base in Morro Bay is derived from fuel and service stations, while only about 8.5% is typical across the state. And so basically in those 2 leading categories within the city, you're about double roughly what the typical agency is for those 2 categories. Now, what's not on here is your district tax. And I would almost, there's just not enough room on this slide, but I would put it sort of in between these 2, because as a destination-based tax, it works a little differently. And so you're going to pick up some Measure E20 on certain categories, such as auto sales, that you may not right now for the Bradley Burns. And what I mean by that is, so for example, any auto sale that a citizen or resident of Morro Bay makes, no matter where they buy their vehicle, you're going to get that Measure E20, even though the Bradley Burns tax, the 1% Bradley Burns, is going to go to that jurisdiction that where the sale was negotiated, where that dealership is located. And so it works a little differently. So instead, it's not going to be quite so heavy in those major categories. It's going to be a little bit more diverse, somewhere in between the statewide average and the Bradley Burns for Morro Bay numbers. So with that brief introduction, let me turn to slide 7. And this is a area of interest that I understand that you have. It is looking essentially at how revenue is performed over time, both on a nominal and on a real after inflation basis. And so this first slide is focused on nominal results. And then in a moment, I do have some real inflation and adjusted returns to share with you. You will note that there is one category that I've marked as confidential here, that is building and construction. There's just not enough purveyors to make that a non-confidential category, and so it is marked confidential. But I do have every single other major industry group here marked. And basically, as you can see, the growth rates between, on the left side, Morro Bay, Bradley Burns, Morro Bay voter-approved district tax, E20, and then the state of California, very, very similar. right at about 4.4 to 4.8% per year. This is the 10-year compound average growth that I calculated from our database. Looking at the numbers back in history, this is adjusted results for any payment aberrations or any corrections. And so I'm trying to give you the best I can at this point in time, long-term 10-year, basically average rate of growth over time. Now on page 8, you will see the same numbers, but this is done on a real after inflation basis. And so of course, inflation, I think we've had about 31% inflation based on what I saw looking back at the CPI indexes over the last 10 years. And so the results are pretty similar, except for, or between the categories still, of course, because that's not going to impact the different growth rates aside from the net result. And so, but you are down from around 4 to 4.8% down to about 1.7 to 2.1 on a net inflation basis. And so there are a few differences between these numbers, and so I thought I would quickly dive into a couple of the reasons for that. And the first one that I saw that stood out to me is that restaurants and hotels, here I am looking at the real rate of return, was a little less in Morro Bay than what I saw statewide. And if I turn to slide 10, I think the real reason for that is most likely just population. You can see here on slide 10, I obtained this population growth over the last 10-year figures from the Department of Finance, the state of California Department of Finance. And so I'm showing here what the population was for the state back in 2010 and then in 2020, and what percent increase we saw. And as you can see, state of California up 6.1%. There's a lot of development happening, and I think that's a theme of this presentation and probably going to answer some of the questions in a way that you may have in the eastern parts of the state where there's a little bit more available land, where things are a little bit cheaper, where there might be more, a big factor in the economy right now is a lot of fulfillment centers opening up and other warehouses where there's space for those things, and the community is, basically that's a feature within the community that the community approves of, and so that sort of thing. And so, the population growth has been a little bit less, of course, in Morro Bay over this period of time. And so I think that may explain some of the restaurant difference there, the variance. With that population growth in other parts of the state, places like Ontario, Eastvale, other areas like that, you have seen more restaurant openings over time. Now on page 11, this is really the big one here that
I've got a question for you real quick.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to
Please,
interrupt.
jump in.
Can you go back
You're
a couple slides, 2 slides from where you're here? There you go. No, the other way. One more. Okay. I didn't think that was the slide I was looking at.
Which slide are you trying to see?
One more back. Okay. Okay. The claim that you're making, there's 2 things that come to my mind. For the major industry group for restaurants and hotels, is it possible to break that down between restaurants and hotels? And
Yeah,
get
I'll
those
have to look at
separated
the
out?
data. I didn't do that work. I'll have to look at the data to see if there's any confidentiality issues there, but certainly that's something that I could pass on.
Okay, yeah. I mean, obviously, you don't want to break any confidentialities with that, and I don't see how it would because there's so many hotels and so many restaurants here. But, I'll defer to you and your expertise on that. But in the future, if you could break that down between those 2, I think for me at least, that would be really helpful.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, and if there's any follow-up that you would appreciate, I'm happy to do that on that subject as well.
I had a question also. Are we going to have access to this presentation? Because it's a lot of data to absorb right now.
I can email it out to the committee if Ken approves.
Absolutely, yeah.
Problem with that?
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
I also wanted to add that the group of restaurants and hotels, I believe, is the standard way that data is presented in all quarterly reports. Is that right?
Yeah, so essentially we start out with, these are our major industry groups that we look at statewide, and then within that major industry group category, say for example, restaurants and hotels, we do have separate business types for fine dining restaurants and all that sort of thing. So there is some breakout within hotels. below this, but yeah, this is the major way that we look at the statewide, slice and splice the statewide data, yes.
So the question that I also had is that I think you're showing 10-year real compound annual growth rates here. The subsequent slide, I think, showed that as 2010 to 2020. So are we dealing with just pre-COVID numbers on this? Or does it include the 2020 dip and then the irrational exuberance we had in 21 and 22?
Yeah, so I've got good point. I've got another slide on that irrational exuberance, so it's good that you're already on that. But yeah, it would just happen to be, so this particular slide would have been 2013 through 2023. And the reasons it's a little different is because in terms of the population growth that you see on the slide that's now showing is because of the fact that on the DOF website, they had some 10-year numbers and they were all presented in terms of
Okay,
decades.
all right, thank you.
Basically the reason, simplifying, you bet. Okay, so let me, I do want to get into a pretty important issue now. Let's see, I'm on page 11. And sorry, I hope I'm, Emily, just jump in and let me know. I'm having a hard time tracking what you guys are seeing. I think we're on the same slide right now, but I'm on slide 11.
Yes, we
Just
are.
jump in if I'm, okay, good. Just jump in if I'm off. So I do want to touch on, so restaurants and hotels was one area, but there's another very important area that I do want to touch on and spend some time on. And you can see I've highlighted a couple different categories because they're all impacted. And that's essentially by the growth of online sales, coupled with the growth of warehouses throughout the state that are sprouting up, coupled with the fact that the district tax there, as you can see, I've got that 4.3%. One of the benefits of your district tax is that you do get, through that general consumer goods category, all revenue for any online purchases being shipped into Morro Bay. So there's a couple things going on here that I do want to touch on, but it is a major difference between the three different entities, the Bradley Burns, the district tax, and the state of California overall. So on page 12, the next slide, I just want to point out that I'm looking now at online activity. And so this is basically brick and mortar, which is the green line up top, sales, traditional retail sales. And then down below is your online sales tax revenue. And I just want to point out a couple things, but one of the big ones here is, of course, online shopping has been growing over time. This has been a long-term trend. But you can also see back in 2019, there was a big surge of tax revenue in the online side. Online line below, the blue line, noted AB 147, and that's essentially a legislative change. So I've got another slide to share that with you. But it was sort of it's a one-time boost from a law change that was nationwide, actually, but California's enabling legislation was AB 147. And it allowed for the additional taxation of online sales coming from out of state that previously often escaped taxation. And then, of course, you also had the pandemic boom when everybody was cooped up and was shopping online. And so a couple factors there that really boosted online sales activity. It's now plateaued a little bit, but it's still a lot closer to the overall brick and mortar sales than they were, say, back in 2014 when those two lines were much further apart. So on slide 13 here, I did want to really quickly review AB 147. And it's something that was enacted in two phases. First, in April 1, 2019, out-of-state internet retailers were required to collect and remit state and local use tax. And so you can see over at the two graphs over on the right, we have in the green line there basically what happened to online sales tax and basically to the pools. And then we also in that yellow line have what we think would have happened absent that legislative change. And so clearly there was quite a big boost to sales activity as a result, or tax revenue as a result of this one-time legislative change. And furthermore, on October 1st of that year, marketplace facilitators. And so what that is basically there's like a big website in which third parties sell online goods, and they may be even very small. Previously, because they were so small, they weren't required to oftentimes to remit tax revenue. But now if you're part of those marketplace facilitators, you're no longer, you're required to collect and remit sales tax as well. And so those two phases really resulted in a large infusion of sales tax overall. So on page 14, You know, so that basically, well, let me go back here to page 14, and you can see, you know, I think before we were at like 4.8% nominal, and I did a little calculation for the state of California overall in terms of the 10-year growth rate. I would argue that without that legislative change, that probably sales tax in California would have been maybe about 4%, somewhere about that range instead of 4.8 on a nominal basis. And so it did have certainly a nice one-time boost to sales tax over that 10-year period. Now, again, we're looking at real compound annual growth rates. And the other category that I did note that was different and that was impactful during this 10-year period was the food and drug category. And that's because there were a couple of new business additions in the city of Morro Bay during this period of time that had an impact. And so you can see that, generally speaking, this is one of the flatter categories around the state with growth, real-time growth of only about 0.7% per year. But you saw about 3.3% on the Bradley Burns side. And so that did definitely have an impact, positive impact for you. One of the things that I knew that you were interested in discussing is your major industry groups and what the trends have been. And so on page 15 or slide 15, you can see that. And I think the biggest thing of note here is that restaurants, your number one major industry group, or shall I say restaurants and hotels, really steady growth over time, certainly marked by the pandemic impact, but quick to come back and reach new highs once again. Fuel and service stations, the next line, the next category, are up and down, of course, with the price of fuel. State and county pools really have grown. But as noted just a minute ago, over on the right side of the graph, that would be your orange line there. These things have really plateaued over the last couple years, and one of the reasons for that is because there's a lot of warehouses, as I alluded to earlier, being built within California so that these internet firms can be more speedy and efficient in terms of their delivery. And the way that sales tax, or at least Bradley Burns tax, works for online sales is if it's shipped from a in-state fulfillment center, the way the law is right now is that tax revenue for that 1% purchase, what we call the Bradley Burns uniform sales tax, goes to the location of where the goods were housed at the time the order was made, basically where it ships from. And so if it's coming from a in-state warehouse, then that money would go to the jurisdiction that has that warehouse. Conversely, if it's coming from out of state, then it goes into the pools and everybody gets a little bit of it. In this case, you can see over the last year or two that there has been sort of a plateauing in online sales, both I think because of the post-pandemic, folks are anxious to get out and shop again, but also because of these new warehouse locations opening up around the state. And so that is an issue for Bradley Burns. It's absolutely no issue at all for Measure E20, because for the district tax as a destination-based tax, you get that money no matter from where the goods ship. As long as they're delivered into Morro Bay, you get your Measure E20 on that. So that's a key difference between Bradley Burns uniform sales tax and your Measure E20. Now, food and drugs, the green line there has, as I mentioned, boosted by a couple new business openings over the last couple years. And then finally, general consumer goods, the purple line at the bottom, you can see that's been a challenge category, not just for you, but for entities throughout the state, as basically recently folks have been shifting their consumption away from buying tangible goods and more towards travel, experiences, leisure, and entertainment. And so that's very typical what we're seeing there in that category, that it has been plateauing. And then over on the right, there's a smaller graph, but you can see a 13-year trend of 83% sales tax growth. Now, this is nominal. It's not adjusted for inflation, but gives you an idea over that time of some pretty significant growth. And then also, I know that of interest, it's typically, agencies want to see how they're faring against other agencies in the neighborhood, in the jurisdiction. And so that's what this chart here, this line graph on page or slide 16 does, is it compares your per capita sales tax receipts versus some other jurisdictions. And to my eye, these look very similar. In fact, over on the right, we're also comparing you against the county, the Central Coast, and California overall. And from what I see there is you've really moved up vis-a-vis the other entities used to be really neck and neck with California, and now you seem to be quite a bit higher over on the right side of the Central Coast and also California overall, and closer to the county trend. Among some of these other city agencies that we have over on the left side, there has been a couple new additions. Really, the only big change that I see here is some pretty significant growth in Pismo Beach that has added some recent new businesses over time. But otherwise, you see that most of these agencies depicted here are pretty similar in terms of the overall trends and the ebbs and flows year by year. So this goes back all the way to 2011. On slide 17, one of you really on top of it. I appreciate that. Really on top of the
Can I get a question
numbers.
in here, please?
Please, yeah.
If you could just go back one slide.
Sure.
When you
I guess
mentioned
I'm in
the-
control of this. Slide
You're
16.
great.
Yeah.
When you mentioned
Okay.
the food and drug and that, would that also, the cost of food has gone up a lot? That should be reflected there. And you mentioned there's a few new businesses. What businesses have made such an impact?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I can't. I looked it up before the meeting to see if I could give you any more detail, and unfortunately, it kind of falls into one of those confidential categories. I can say there's two new businesses that have opened in the food and drug category over the last couple of years that has boosted you. Interestingly, with food, and I don't want to get too far off track here, but taxation, there's a whole bunch of exemptions in California sales tax, and one of those is food that you buy at grocery store. So most of the stuff in the grocery store category, believe it or not, is not taxed. What you're typically looking at is like alcohol sales and toilet paper and hard goods, laundry detergent, stuff like that. But yeah, I'm sorry I can't get into a little bit more detail on that one with you and really answer your question.
Does the city council have the legal right to go into closed session and have access to that confidential information? Not us, obviously, but the city council.
Yeah. The only way to have access to that confidential information is to do there's a resolution that authorize particular people to access the data for government use. And I don't think I've ever seen a city council I've had cities ask about it, but once they start investigating some of the legal liabilities associated with access to that data and security of that data, I've never known a city to actually implement that where the council is looking at that.
Okay, but I appreciate the response. I really do. But so the answer is we don't know if the city council has the legal right to access that information.
I think they do have the legal right,
Okay.
just like under the resolution that basically under the state of California's law, basically the
Right.
California Department of Fee and Administration administers it, and they require a council resolution that details the names of the folks that are authorized to view the data. And so I think it's technically possible, but I've never practically, I don't think I'm aware of a single city governing body around the state that does that.
Yeah, okay. And my apologies. I know you're not a law firm. I get that. I fully
Okay.
understand that. So I know
No,
it's
no
an illusion,
problem.
but
That's what I'm here for.
Okay.
It's a pleasure. So don't worry. And feel free. And, this is what I do every day too. So, I understand there might be some questions you have that I may, kind of skip over some information quickly, and I may not answer fully what you might
Sure,
be wondering
because-
about. So
Because
jump in.
what comes to my mind is this, and Brian was bringing this, I think was alluding to this, is that you
Mhm.
have certain instances where certain businesses can have a positive impact on a community. And to me, just off the top of my head and not having access to this information until right now live, that becomes one of my questions is that can we ascertain particularly what businesses are creating this positive impact? I mean, it seems to me that would be an important discussion, and obviously it's confidential information, and I appreciate that, I really do, and I
Yeah.
understand it. But it just seems to me for a city council, and one of our representatives is here right now, that if they're interested in, having the question answered, what can we do in order to increase revenue? It seems to me that getting on that micro level and understanding these businesses are really doing well in this community. And these are other businesses doing great, but these are particularly doing well. What can we do to focus on this type of business? So it seems to me that type of information would be important.
So there is a maybe a practical way to get at that, and if you'll indulge me just for a minute, is we do put out, as part of our work effort for you every quarter, a newsletter that is a one-page front and back summary of both statewide results and trends each quarter and what's happening locally in the city. And as part of that, there was, and actually I think it was due, as I understand it, to HDL working with the governor, Pete Wilson, way back when. Pete Wilson put out a executive order, and one of the things that is allowed, one of the exceptions to the confidentiality, is to be able to present a top 25, and it's got to be 25, of your taxpayers presented in either alphabetical or random order. And so we do that every quarter as part of that newsletter, and we also include some commentary on the what happened that quarter in terms of sales tax results. And so you could definitely go back and look at that newsletter and look at who's in the top 25 now versus 10 years ago, and particularly knowing the different categories, and understand a little bit about some of the new, who's changed in amidst that top 25 listing of taxpayers, and have an idea of, what's going on. So as a practical matter, there is a way to kind of look through that non-confidential public newsletter where we are not revealing any confidential data or any business results, but you are seeing your top 25 taxpayers plus the trends in these major industry groups. So hopefully that might help a little bit.
So I guess I'm going to ask my colleagues to probably hold their questions till the end of the presentation. We have some action items to get to. So I do have an agenda item to get another round of questions from the committee members. We also need to probably open it up for public comment. So why don't we let them finish the presentation, and we'll take it from there.
Okay, so I hear you. Let me move on pretty quickly. It sounds like we're pressed for time, and I've been talking quite a bit. So let me get through this real quick and just really quickly just touch on, you noted the exuberance of sales tax recently. So our forecasting in terms of future results is basically anchored in the fact that 2021, we had like 20% growth in sales tax, probably 5 or 6 years of normal growth in the economy. And so that's why we're sort of in this period, as you can see, 2023 of normalization. And basically, when we look through our forecasting, I'm going to move through this quickly because I understand there's a time constraint here, but we look at any number of factors, all of which are here, plus aberrations in your data, your unique sales tax mix when we're going through our forecasting effort. And we consider any number of factors right now, principally, of course, interest rates, with the basically the consensus being that the Fed is going to start lowering interest rates, hopefully here in February, foremost in our mind in terms of major impacts. And then for you, of course, we're always looking at any number of sources of data related to major industry groups, and certainly for restaurants and hotels being your number one category, this is certainly an area that we look at with any number of different factors, including the new minimum wage increase, and also what are prices eating in versus at grocery stores versus menu prices. That certainly has an impact as well from the National Restaurant Association. And then we put that together in a quarterly consensus forecast report that you can find on our website, and it's about the economy overall. But basically our outlook is that statewide is that we're going to have this, next year is going to be a little lower growth as we continue to work through this normalization period, and then after that get back up to a little bit higher than that, back to 3%, more toward that normal rate of growth. But we think we've got probably about another year to go in terms of this normalization. And so that basically concludes my presentation. So I do welcome your questions. It's been a pleasure to be with you today. Please, happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Before we go to the public, Brian, do you have anything else? Jean, any other questions?
Yeah, what sort of struck me is that we have a below average growth rate in our tourism sector compared to California, even though it's, let's see, 1.7% versus 2.6% for the rest of California. And I know for a fact that SLO County has like an 8 to 10% growth rate. So just curious on any thoughts from you or anyone else on why it is below average, and what might be done to encourage that upwards.
I'll just real quick jump in and then, give it back to you. But I think my thought on that was basically why I did that research on the population growth, because some of that, I didn't look at the county growth so much, but statewide, I know that there's basically what we're seeing over the last 10 plus years is that the inland areas of the state are growing faster. That's where a lot of job growth is. That's where housing is more cheaper. And so therefore there's more restaurants being built, more population. And so I think basically, you guys are a major, fantastic tourist destination, but you're a little bit off the beaten path, and that's how you like it, right? You have this great quality of life there in Morro Bay, and you want to preserve that. And so you're not looking to be a, fast-growing, entity with a lot of new fast food restaurants popping up all the time and that sort of thing. And so I think it's mostly, at least versus the state, comes down to population growth.
Well, most of our tourists don't come from the county. They come from either northern, southern, or central California. So those areas are growing fast, but our tourism is growing below their growth rate. Anyway, it's just something for people to think about.
I had some questions to kind of mull around or pose. When I look at I think that gas sales are probably either our number 1 or number 2 category, according to the quarterly reports that I looked at. That seems to be, and I think your reports verify this, that there's actually been a real decline in that over the past 10 years. And the nominal growth rate has been small. We all worry about gas prices, but with EVs increasing, with gas mileage increasing, that probably will not be a significant growth component. I guess a question for HDL is, are there business categories where we don't seem to be, where there's significant room for improvement?
Yeah, my thinking is now we do have a whole economic development branch that might be served having a conversation with in terms of they're the experts. But from my sales tax perspective, I'll give you my 2 cents, and that is that I think you want to play to your strengths, and your strengths are that you are a really fantastic place to visit, and I've been there, had some really nice stays there in Morro Bay, and you want to play to your strengths in terms of your restaurants and your hotel development while also preserving the quality of life in the community. And I think you guys do a great job at that. And, you're not going to be, you don't have a lot of, nor do you want to be, a location with a lot of like warehouses or, big box stores. You want to play to your strengths and preserve the quality of life in the community. And I think you do a great job with that, and you want to continue that focus.
Thank you.
I don't know if we were set up today or for some future conversation, we were talking about just the general ideas of revenues, things that might help where Morro Bay is, how it wants to see itself, its image, its marketing, and all that. We know that inland is growing, and then we're the place for people to go inland. And I don't know if today's the day, but we have thrown around this idea of having a real conversation about where our business is, how do we play to our strength, what can we be doing? I'm sure there's committees that looked at all this, but from conversations I've had with just our group, it seems like we have this enormous upside that we haven't been able to dig through between the water, the fishing, the sports field, just the rest of the general beauty. I mean, we're in Sedona, which I think is one of the top places to be. And why are all these people, they're just there to hike, and it's 100 degrees. And they can't even get in the parking lot. No, we're there. It's 30, 40 minutes, and then they might, and no one even knows we have hiking in Morro Bay.
Yeah.
For me, I go to the demographics and I go to risk, and the demographics of the baby boomers, they're flying to Sedona to hike in 100-degree weather. So I see so much upside of what we have and how that can be, but that's just for myself. And again, I understand this has probably been done and there's been all these great ideas, but somehow I thought we kicked around that might happen,
That's actually agenda item number 2.
Okay. I get ahead of myself. You guys stop me. I just next to Mike. He keeps me
He's got a longer elbow than I do. There was no agenda correspondence on this, so I'll open it up for public comment before moving to the next step.
My name is Homer Alexander. Excellent presentation, Mr. Brown.
Oh, thank you.
I have a question
Appreciate
for you. Over the last several months, there has been different opinions regarding the amount of sales tax revenue that would be generated if Vistra was able to build a battery energy storage system on their property. Since I was interested, I emailed Vistra and asked them to clarify. I'm going to quote their representative's response. The Brattle report lays out how Morro Bay and its 2.5% local and state sales tax could potentially raise $19 million from Vistra purchase of the $760 million worth of material purchase for construction. We have indicated to the city of Morro Bay that Vistra would accept Morro Bay as the point of sale. Here's my question, Mr. Brown. Assuming Vistra's position doesn't change and the $760 million figures in the ballpark, do you agree with their statement?
You know, I'm sorry, but I don't know, not familiar enough with the project to give you any concrete thoughts, but I will just share that in terms of projects like that and construction, the sales tax allocation is very, it's complicated and it's challenging. And so I'm sure that's something that we'll be looking at along with city staff to evaluate. But at this point, I don't have an opinion on that. I just don't have enough information to speak intelligently on that.
Any other public comments? AGP, is there anybody in the video queue? Okay.
There are no raised hands in the queue.
Bringing it back to the committee, are there any comments or follow-up recommendations on this? Okay. Yeah, I'll ask for a copy of the presentation. And I know that the city gets a quarterly report on its taxable sales. That would also be something nice to circulate to the CFAC on a regular basis. Our next item is a discussion of potential revenue generation. This matter's on the agenda at the rest of a couple CFAC members, and I'm looking at you, Brian, specifically. As noted in the last several budget documents, the expenses and revenue lines for some general fund categories and for Q&E in particular are expected to cross in several years. Without a substantial increase in revenue, service levels may be challenged and infrastructure funding will continue to lag. This matter is complicated by the fact that the city already performs at a fairly high level for general fund revenues per capita. There may be low-hanging fruit, but other real gains may require new programs and approaches. Our purpose here today is to discuss potential new city revenue sources and how existing revenue sources can be materially increased. Prior to getting into the committee discussion, Director Conrad, do you have any comments or a discussion on that?
Thank you. Actually, I was going to say basically the very similar comments that you've already made. So
Okay, thank
we can
you.
just launch right into discussion.
Mr. Dorfman. I can start at the other side if you want.
Oh, I'm happy. Where should I start? Okay. Gosh, I probably go right down to the Rock maybe 3, 4, 5 times a week. When my children were younger, I probably was there 10, 12 times a week. So I just could tell you everything about the Rock parking lot, the people that are there, the venue, just on and on. So for me, what seems like we're leaving off the table when I look at other tourist recreational areas, when I look at the beach communities in California, I look at the mountain communities in Colorado. I've spent a lot of time in these communities. I've spent a lot of time with the development around them. And they continue to, as the gentleman said, they continue to play to their strength. And so Morro Bay has all this large land use in nature, and how are we involving the tourists in these areas, from the hiking to the water, to just how many people would come in here. I've heard from that just to come here to fish is a whole thing. If you have a boat and you want to get out on the water and park and all that, that it can be a whole process. And there's so many people inland that would love to be, so I feel like Morro Bay has a lot to offer, and if we can make it available, there's certainly the demographics and the finances that are within a 100-mile radius of Morro Bay. I feel like we're not amplifying where our strengths already are. I don't know that, initially, it's like if we take care of our own business, then where does that leave us? So sometimes in business, it's, how can you involve your customer more without any cost, right? And then where do you decrease your risk? So for example, has anybody even have a reckoning of how many people and how much time is spent looking at those otters at the point where you go to, everyone know where Target Rock is, right? Instead of going into the rock, you just go to the left all the time. So we spent, I think, what was it, 2 years ago, almost $200,000 putting signage throughout Morro Bay to find the Chamber of Commerce and these other locations, and we don't have something saying Otter Point. Tourists love that. What do tourists want to be at a destination? You have otters. Do you realize what they're doing with their otters in Carmel and what they have been doing for the last 30 years? Their whole industry just at and it's not even as accessible. You have to go and hike in, and then they have a docent, and they talk to you about the otters. They have little coloring books, and they hand your kid a little badge. We embrace the tourism. So that's one area I think we missed the mark there with what we could do. There's been talk about what we can do for concessions out there, just hypothetically. I think not exposing our hiking trails in the same way an area like Sedona does is a big miss, or like Big Sur. So I think those are things we already, like, who's going to recreate that? What would it take to make a hiking trail along the bluff? And then there's this talk about if we can get hotels. To me, it's less about taking the hotels we have and changing them, and I haven't been involved, but if there's locations where we can see that kind of hotel that can be that miniature kind of conference center. They have one out, on San Francisco, that I can't remember, that one's called Seacrest. It's just things that have already been done. I really think we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We have what we need here. We're not communicating it to our customers. People want to go hiking. I'm telling you, they just do. And there's nothing in Morro Bay that speaks to those, it's back to the demographics. There's things like, do you know where's all the sand going? Well, we have all this sand. People would drive just to walk on the sand. We have the largest sandbox in California, maybe. It's those catchy things people want. You have it.
Jean?
I think all those are excellent points. And again, part of that is the beauty and the hidden treasure of those of us who live here, maybe who don't necessarily want that exploited. But on the other hand, we financially do need to exploit it more. So that's why we're here. Those ideas about the otter, oh my gosh, we have the #1 most accessible otter viewing spot probably in the United States.
Not one sign.
And yeah, and they are the #1 tourist attraction. That's been well recognized. So yeah, some of those are pretty low cost initiatives, I think. PR, marketing, signage, that wouldn't necessarily take a lot of money either. I maybe take an opportunity to turn these ideas and make them workable and put some figures around it, and take previous work task forces, I'm sure, have looked at that, but this brainstorming here, that's a lot.
Michael? You can say ditto if you want.
I think these are outstanding ideas. I know whenever I'm approached with something like this, any type of problem, maybe I'm probably more like Steve this way, is that I'm probably a very nuts and bolt guy. Something that I know that I've discussed and we've talked about before is the idea of, if I'm going to solve a numeric problem, then I want to know numerically what's working and what's not. Now, I know we just got a presentation that said and I'm paraphrasing, HDL is saying that nobody has ever looked at individual businesses on that confidential information to take a look at exactly which businesses are really producing and which businesses specifically are not. And from what I understand here, that's never been done before. I've never looked at problems as being, wait for everybody else to do it, now it's okay for us to do it. I think there are a lot of things like that, including what we have seen down as far as the finances of the Embarcadero and the businesses down there, and what a lot of us have discussed in the last 6 months or so. I think it would be important for the city council to get on a micro level and start looking at what businesses are really benefiting this area more than others. I think all the businesses are benefiting this area. So don't misunderstand what I'm saying here. But I think it would be important to take a look at a individual level and say, hey, these particular businesses, boy, they're really ballooning more than the other ones. Let's take a look at why that's happening and what we can do to benefit this community with those. So I would recommend, on top of what's been said, I'd recommend let's take a look at the individual things. And yes, a lot of that would probably have to be done in closed session, obviously, and I agree with that. But let's not be afraid to do those things. So there you go.
So as Michael said, I'm probably more nuts and bolts and tactical. I know in the existing economic development strategic plan, the city did ask for a breakdown of taxable sales by the Embarcadero, by the downtown, by North Morro Bay, and by Quintana. It would be very useful to know, to see who's increased and who hasn't. I think there's been a lot of turnover and even some business closures in North Morro Bay. I bet that one's gone down substantially. Perhaps Quintana's done the same thing, and we don't know what to do unless we know what's working, what's not working. So I think kind of as a middle ground, rather than trying to figure out what the sales at Radio Shack are, I'd rather know what the sales on Quintana are. So that'd be probably my suggestion. On sales taxes, I'm not convinced yet we have an opportunity to increase the types of businesses, but certainly having a program like my colleagues are talking about to maybe stay one more day because they can go to Montana de Oro for a hike, or they can go into the bay for a kayak experience or something else. Morro Bay's been a day trip location for 50%, and probably 25% spend a night. Most don't spend more than 2 nights. So I think that we could work with the tourism industry to say, how do we get a second night into our existing hotels? And how do we fill the niches that we don't fill right now, one of which is the conference or the meeting facility that the city's been talking about on their Market Plaza project, plus there's a market niche for the upper end or even the branded hotels that aren't in the community. I think that's an opportunity without trying to fundamentally change everything. Property taxes, I think there's minimal growth there, regardless of what might happen on the Vistra site. We get a lot of retirees here, and they're simply transferring over their reduced base from wherever they're coming from. God bless them. But on TOT, I think there's an opportunity for growth there. Our occupancy rate is still in the 65-70% range, which isn't terrible, but it isn't great. Having one more night there also increases the amount that might be spent at a restaurant. Certainly the TOT would go along with that. And then recognizing what the value of the vacation rentals are. That's been the biggest growth rate in our TOT over the last 10 years. Another one that I'll bring up again because it's not popular is simply paid parking. We are the only coastal community that doesn't have a paid parking program. Avila Beach gets $500,000 a year from that. Pismo gets more. Why we're leaving that money on the table, I don't know, but it's a lot of money to leave on the table that could go towards maintaining the Rock parking lot, putting in paths, maintaining access down to our beaches, whether it's Baby Beach or whether it's the Rock Beach or the others. So I think that there's a study on that. It says it's feasible. we have to pursue that, and unless we're willing to say that we don't need $500,000 for infrastructure development. Finally, on my list is city property. City has a significant amount of property, but I guess my main point is that we've been living off the work that was done 50 years ago in the 1970s for the subdivision and the master planning for the Embarcadero, all the way from Atascadero Road down to the marina. That subdivision plan hasn't changed one iota, and it's being built out. The growth in our sales taxes and hospitality has primarily been a result of the work that was done by our predecessors. It's time to do the waterfront master plan so we can identify new development opportunities, so we're not going to run into being a built-out community along the waterfront. So those are my particular comments. I'll open it up, I guess, to the public. There isn't any agenda correspondence on this one either, is there? So are there any comments from the public on this matter?
Yeah, Bill Bowes, Morro Bay. I think as everyone knows, 1964 was a big day. We're celebrating 60-year anniversary here next month. We built a power plant. At that time, that became a big revenue generator for the city. 107 acres that it was built on went fallow in 2014. And since that point in time, we've had revenue challenges. I sat on the Finance Committee for a few years ago, and I'm somewhat familiar with the challenges, but you look at where you're going to be in 2 or 3 years from now, and it gets worse and worse. And we're just not able to handle the infrastructure needs that we have. What we do not want to do is go ahead and keep that 107 acres lying fallow. Look how much vacant land already exists around the Embarcadero. So to get more tourist-type businesses here is not very realistic. And certainly the likelihood that someone is going to put the money in to go make the 107 acres where the power plant was built clean enough to allow visitor-serving activities is, I think, very remote. And as many may not know, but the deed of that property that PG&E sold to Duke and then Duke sold to Vista has a prohibition for use of that property for any visitor-serving purpose. And so whoever's going to buy that property to put commercial activity there has to somehow pay off PG&E and buy the liability themselves. But we do not want to take away the power of the city council to make decisions. There's 107 acres. What we need is some high revenue generating commercial property, and let the city council be able to look to see what the choices are. There's best right now. That might be a good thing, although we have some safety concerns, but yet I understand the fire department lead would not release the full report on safety on the hazards and the ability to go counter those hazards with our fire department. So that's something that needs to be done. The other thing we need to do, really talk the pluses and minuses of whether we could have a BES. The League of Women Voters is wanting to throw some kind of a forum to allow the pros and the minuses. Our mayor does not want to allow that to happen. I think she's a supporter of voting A24, which is going to restrict this property, the 107 acres, to remain visitor serving, despite the challenges. So I think certainly the Finance Committee should look at what the potential revenue generation could be in that property. You'd like to get some property that doesn't destroy the environment at all, but yet generates lots of revenue. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Homer Alexander. I have a specific suggestion on how to increase revenue. The city should aggressively pursue the sale and redevelopment of the city-owned property at 781 Market Street, the lot below on the Embarcadero, and the lot at the corner of Market and Pacific. These 3 city-owned parcels have been an unproductive asset for years. The city has an offer on the table for all 3 parcels from a very credible local business owner who lives in Morro Bay with his family. The project that is envisioned is a 110-room plus full-service hotel with a 7,000 square foot conference center. The project would also include improvements to the Centennial Staircase and the plaza. A back-of-the-envelope estimate of additional revenue the city would receive from the new hotel and restaurant would be north of $800,000. As an additional benefit, the conference center would generate economic activity for the downtown businesses. This would be especially true in the slower months. As you know, the transient occupancy tax budget this year is $4.5 million. As a point of comparison, Pismo Beach's budget for TOT is $15.8 million. I'm going to repeat that. Ours is 4.5, theirs is 15.8. One of the major reasons their TOT is $11 million higher is they have 8 full-service hotels. We have 1, and it's marginal at best. Since you have been tasked to look at additional revenue opportunities, I suggest you recommend the city move forward with the current proposal for the purchase and redevelopment of all 3 of these parcels. Thank you very much.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, AGP, is there anybody in the queue?
There are no raised hands in the queue.
Thank you. Thank you all for your comments. Bringing it back to the committee, how do you want to proceed? This is basically an item that we wanted to cover. We probably have a couple options. One is to simply provide these comments to the city without any real handle on it, or we could appoint a subcommittee to work on it further. Michael rolls his eyes. Okay, so I think what we want to make sure of is that we're constructive and we're specific to city staff, so they have something to respond to, and we can tell, you know, much as Mr. Alexander has done, what specific things we think they should do to increase tourism or something like that. So, you know, get it down to the nuts and bolts level so they can say, what are you asking us to do and what are you not asking us to do?
Try and get clear. So a lot of my background is in sales and marketing, so it seems to me this is a sales and marketing question, right? Okay, so it's both, though, for me. I wanted to bring up, first of all, I want to support what you all said about the businesses. I think anything we can do to support the businesses, we make so much money on their backs. They take all the risk, they have all that work. And I really agree with what Michael's saying is how do we help our businesses? It's really good to know what they're doing. I noticed for our hotels, December seems to be a very slow month. So from a marketing point of view, we're considered this very safe place, right? We saw that during COVID. People came to Morro Bay because we were safe. So I see this whole family safe thing in December. How do we market December? Like, we know December's a slow month. I haven't seen any specific marketing to bring it up. There could be there's just these holes that this is why people go to beach communities. They build up these family values there around Carmel, around Newport, things like that. Why doesn't Morro Bay just bring themselves forward? So if that's about marketing, then I'm interested.
So is there a preference to either sort of put on record what we've done so far, follow up more specifically? I had some specific comments about, you know, things that I thought we ought to do, but those require some additional fleshing out and specifics. Is there an interest in forming any sort of subcommittee or some further action? Could be a special meeting of this group. Jean, did you have a comment?
I'm very willing to support that.
Michael?
The first thing that comes to me is that if we're going to have, hypothetically, if we were to have a special meeting, I mean, you know, would it be productive to contact the chamber and get them involved with it as well? Or based on a thought like that?
I'd rather take the first step.
Okay.
Yeah. So my suggestion, based on where we are right now, is that we take the information and the presentation that's been made so far. Can we appoint you and Jean as a subcommittee to flesh it out for the next meeting? And is that acceptable to you too?
Yeah, she's fantastic. I have no problem.
Okay. Any Brown Act issues with that, staff?
I think in an interest of just being overly cautious, I do believe you'd need to come back and have an agenda item to form the committee. Since
Okay.
it's not on the agenda today.
Okay, all right. For that particular purpose? Quite frankly, I don't want to wait till October to have a meeting to appoint a subcommittee that could be working for the next 2 months.
Yeah, I'm available too.
Yeah, we can do a special meeting anytime. I'm fine with that.
Can we
Just
have
to-
a-
Just to set this up.
Can we have a video special meeting to have that on? There's no impact to staff other than simply agendizing it and taking an action.
I will need to check with the clerk and follow back up with you on that.
Okay, thank you.
We'll do that.
Thank you all, and thank you, Brian, for bringing this up. The next item is a request by the Police Department for some additional Q&E funding. I'll turn it over to staff to introduce the presentation.
Good afternoon, committee members, Finance Department. Thank you all for allowing me to be here. Amy Watkins, Morro Bay Police Department. We're here to discuss this item. Just start off by saying this is more appropriate, I think, explained as maybe correcting an oversight or maybe an error that has taken place for several years. But this is specific to our COPS grant, also known as the Supplemental Law Enforcement Services Fund. A little bit about this COPS grant. The purpose was created in 1996 by California State Legislation, AB 3229. This grant allocated $100 million to local governments yearly for frontline law enforcement. The scope of this grant and the funds that were provided are grant funds, and the enabling legislation mandates each municipality will receive funds yearly to be spent on frontline enforcement services. The funds cannot be used to supplant resources, but instead must be used to supplement existing resources or funding. These grant funds can be used for salaries, services, supplies, equipment, and administrative overhead. These funds cannot be diverted into any entity's general fund and must instead be used for the aforementioned frontline law enforcement services. Additionally, administrative overhead costs may not exceed 5% of the total award. The City of Morro Bay Police Department receives about $100,000 a year, which is the minimum for any city or county. It goes up from there based on population. The last couple years, we've been receiving more around $150,000. During COVID, with the increase in sales tax, we received a little bit more, which has put a fund balance in our current COPS fund. So when we talk about operational administrative services, I wanted to clarify the difference between the two. Your operational services are your frontline law enforcement, your patrol officers, your day-to-day operations, patrol, and then emergency services, any emergency service that we provide. On the administrative services side, that is your support staff, that's behind the scenes, completion of tasks, oversight of operations, and operational support. The property and evidence technician that we're discussing today falls under your administrative services. It is not operational, as it maintains oversight of property and evidence from officers to property and evidence and maintaining that chain of custody. When we talk about supplementing versus supplanting, simply put, supplement means to add, supplant means to replace. If general fund can no longer fund the property and evidence technician position, another funding source outside of the COPS grant must be used. And that's per the legislation set by AB 3229 and enacted under Government Code Section 30062. What I wanted to do is provide, certainly this committee, with an understanding of how the police department currently uses our COPS grant. I have several items here that we've purchased over the years that enhances our service for our community and provides that frontline service, a lot of beneficial equipment that benefits our community directly. Patrol vehicles have been purchased over the years, patrol motorcycles, our electronic message boards that we use on a regular basis. They're currently out on South Bay Boulevard, notifying of a public works project. Officer resource manuals or publications, so your penal codes, keeping them up to date. Our unmanned aerial systems, our entire drone program is funded by our COPS grant. Community outreach supplies or crime prevention products. Training file system software for our field training program, our accountability through use of force. Our mobile app, uniforms, recruitment tools, range equipment, range supplies. We've purchased patrol rifles out of our COPS grant. We are about to purchase some firearms out of our COPS grant. We also repair those firearms, shotguns, and rifles using our COPS grant. Vehicle maintenance, vehicle body repairs. One of the things that I think it's important is we are self-insured as a city. Therefore, if something happens to our vehicles, if we get damaged, if it doesn't exceed that $5,000 deductible, it comes out of our funds. So I'm paying for vehicle repairs, I'm paying for body repairs. Things happen. Vehicles get dented. But again, that shows our public, our community, the pride that we take in our vehicles and our fleet. We spend a lot of money on those vehicles and we want to keep them looking good for our community. Officer wellness support, wellness apps, so software. Community events, we do a lot of community events throughout the year. That's a part of engaging with our community. It's also a form of crime prevention. Police radios, external vest carriers, vehicle maintenance software, AEDs. I recently purchased 13 AEDs that are in service for our community, that are in our patrol vehicles. That was paid through our COPS grant. First aid trauma kits. I just purchased 2 quite excellent trauma kits that if we had a situation, you could throw this trauma kit down to somebody. It has an iPad in it. They could go to the issue that the person is suffering, and it will direct them on how to administer first aid. Those were about $12,000 a piece, and I bought 2 of them with my COPS grant. One of them is in our school resource officer vehicle. Tire deflation devices, our stop sticks, to try to keep pursuits to a minimum. And then our electric bicycles that we use a lot for festivals, community outreach, neighborhood cop, things like that. Measure Q&E funds currently pays for police sergeant, 2 police officers, our community service officer, our annual payments to SLO Sheriff for County Bomb, Drug, and Task Force and Gang Task Force, our annual regional SWAT contribution, annual payments for CLETS data lines to SLO Sheriff. It supports our body cameras. Recently bought an evidence drying rack and refrigerator, and it did purchase a few years ago, our active shooter kits. So I think you can see the difference in the two, from measures money funded to what we fund out of our COPS grant. Our property and evidence technician is estimated to be about $60,000 this next year. That's 40% of that COPS grant. that we receive every year at $150,000. So that's 40%. If reallocated to measures money, $60,000 out of the total measures money projected at 4.3 million is 1.39%. If it's reduced to a 3.7 million, it's at 1.62%. So that basically puts us fairly even with our public safety counterparts as far as allocation. So I will certainly answer any questions that you might have, but I think that this is more of a situation where, and I just wanted to reiterate that, under the legislation, this is to supplement, not supplant. And with whatever move was made to put this property and evidence technician position in the COPS grant, was quite possibly an oversight, but it is not supported by the legislation and what this was meant for initially. So if you have any questions, I'll certainly answer those.
Committee questions? Michael?
This is exactly the type of issues that I feel we should be funding with our Measure E funds, no question. Would it make a difference? Why not do, instead of a part-time permanent, why not do this as a full-time permanent? Would that make a difference for you guys?
It's currently at a 75% part-time permanent. There's certainly work to be done for this individual. The individual we have in this position right now is a very capable individual, and she has talents beyond property and evidence. One of those talents would be bringing in additional money on grants. She's very good at grant writing, which is something that we've been looking for a long time at the police department. So if we were to make this a full-time, I would make the recommendation that 75% remain with property and evidence. The 25% would be focused more on grant generation, revenue generation for the police department. Again, that's kind of future forward-looking, and I appreciate you bringing that up. There is need, there always is. We are, like every other department in the city, severely understaffed. I appreciate that. I think that 75% of the work in property evidence is where we are today, but there's certainly more things to look at. And at the same time, if that became an opportunity, a COPS grant would be something that would make sense for that additional 25%. I'm not putting that out, I'm going to put myself out there, but that would be something that would supplement and enhance our ability, not the funding of a position that is required.
Okay, yeah, because I guess in the big picture, the simple question is this: do you need more? Is this okay for right now, for what you need?
This is okay for right now.
Okay.
I had a few questions, and thank you, Chief, for answering. I think I provided some questions earlier in the week, yesterday. And I think your comment about the potential ineligibility, as I'll call it, for this position in that fund answers 90% of my question. This is a valuable position. It's a necessary position. My longer-term concern, I expressed this when we adopted the budget, is that in a couple of years, we're going to be in a deficit position for Q&E. And by 2028, we're probably going to be, that gross revenue is declining. And I don't want to be faced with a decision in 26 or 27 about who gets to pull their straw out of the milkshake first. So I concur with Michael's comment that this is the kind of thing that I think the voters wanted. These are essential public services. I guess I'll ask the question, so with the, I think it's like $160,000 that you will free up in the COPS account, is it possible to swap out another commitment that we have? Because we're not going to be approving this for one budget cycle. I assume that we'll be approving for this budget cycle and every budget cycle in the future. So it isn't a $60,000 item. Over the next 10 years, it's probably a $700,000 item that we need to fit into the budget. So I guess we'll task finance staff to kind of redo our calculations to find out what does it look like after that? After you put another straw in the milkshake, what does that look like? So I think that answers my questions.
And if I could just speak to that, and that's why I listed the things that we do purchase under our COPS grant, because I think that a lot of the things, vehicles, motorcycles that we're now using to enforce safety on our streets, those things come out of our COPS grant. And that's something that we do supplement, because those are obligations that the city and the general fund have. If you want full-time police service, 24 hours, that's an obligation. So we already, now this is $60,000, and I imagine it would increase slightly over the years, and I'll leave that to finance. But I think this is an excellent time for me to demonstrate. You're going to hear next from the fire chief about fixing a piece of equipment. When we talk about what are the things that we can remove from measures, I don't know that there's anything that we can remove from measures, because we are already very, very slight in measures money that the police department receives. But what it does, by removing or taking that $60,000 out of my COPS grant and putting it into measures, it now opens up for, if something were to happen similar to what fire is bringing forward to you, that would come out of COPS. That's an option for us. And we spend a good amount of that budget maintaining our equipment, just as fire is coming and asking you for today.
There is no agenda correspondence on this item. Are there any public comments on it? No public comments. AGP, is there anybody in the queue?
There are no raised hands in the queue.
Thank you. Bringing it back to the committee. What's the committee's pleasure?
I move that we approve staff recommendation on this.
I'll second that.
Okay. Clerk, please call the roll.
Vice Chair Woody,
Yes.
Member Johnson,
Yes.
Member Dorfman,
Yes.
Chair Peck.
Yes,
Motion passes 4-0.
thank you. The next item on the agenda is the funding department ladder truck repair. Can we have a staff presentation, please?
Good afternoon. Thank you for your time with this. So the issue that I'm bringing forward is a repair to the ladder truck. Over the last year, we've had some issues with our ladder truck. We had the city finance a replacement of the pump, which was about a $40,000 repair. And at that time, we were told by the fleet mechanic that they believed the ladder repair was going to be $7,000 to $10,000, which we were going to be able to absorb out of our budget. As they were researching it and identifying exactly what parts needed to be replaced, they got a quote back on the price of the parts, and one part alone was $35,000. So they were taken aback. They actually went back to the manufacturer to look and see if that was a typo or a mistake, because nobody anticipated it being that high. And then I independently went directly to the manufacturer to get an estimate on the parts. And they were indeed in that price range. There's a number of parts that we have to replace. If it would help to understand what we're looking at, I do have a couple pictures loaded up on the computer I could put up to show. So what it is what you're looking at is the windshield of the ladder truck, and then the big red thing is a nozzle that sticks out off the front of the ladder. The white plate that's mounted to, it's a big bracket and a plate. That plate is what's costing about $35,000. There's a few other components attached to that, and it's a safety issue. As that ladder extends out, that plate supports all the weight, the nozzle reaction from the water being forced against the ladder. And so it's not something that any mechanic or machinist could make. It has to be certified and rated by the manufacturer because it's a life safety thing. We're actually putting people on the ladder. We're using it to effect rescues. So it has to be rated and certified to certain ratings. So it's seems to be a very simple part, but it's actually very complex and integral to the safety of the movable part of the ladder and to being able to utilize the waterway that's attached there. Without it, the ladder's out of service. We have one additional picture just from the side. So you can see it's the white bracket that the red nozzle is mounted to, and it's in a place where the ladder slides out. And currently, when you extend the ladder out, it shifts out of position and doesn't lock into position, so it's not safely secured. So we're not able to put a person on the ladder with it. So at this point, we have a $2 million ladder truck that has a new pump put in it, and we can't use the ladder. If you put it into terms of repairing your private vehicle, if you put $4,000 to repair, a $45,000 car, it's the equivalent of asking for these repairs altogether. We've spent, if this is approved, a total of about $90,000 to repair this. The ladder truck costs about $2 million to replace currently, and it's about a 4-year build time. So if I ordered it today, I wouldn't see it for another 4 years. At this point, we've talked to city finance, and based on the budget that we have this year, we felt that it would be most appropriate to ask CFAC if there were major Q&E funds to allocate for this one-time repair. Open to the board for any additional questions, or if I can provide any additional information.
Brian, questions? Gene? Michael?
Yeah, I got a comment. Thank you for bringing in the photographs. You get a lot of these presentations, and it never really hit me that you come in with a photograph and we can actually see what you're talking about. That makes a huge difference. Thank you for doing that.
Absolutely. It's very difficult to explain what this piece is, and looking at the quote, a mounting plate weldment or something like that, you can't understand what that part is.
Yeah, because...
So being able to show it, it just makes it a lot easier than trying to spend a long time explaining it.
Yeah, because you get an agenda item that talks of repair of a ladder. It's like, well, just go to Home Depot and go buy you one. I mean, it's fine. It's not a big deal. No, thank you for bringing that in. As I said before with the police department, this is the exact type of issues that, Measure E and Measure Q, in my opinion, were really designed for on this. I mean, and any time safety comes up here, police, fire, that's why I always tend to ask the question, is there anything else you need? I mean, we're here. I mean, it's, so, anything like this, I'm always more than willing to say, hey, let's sit down and talk about this, whatever you need.
Thank you. The estimate we received was about $45,000 for this repair. I'm asking for $50,000. There is some overtime incurred because we have to take the ladder truck to Modesto to have the repair done. And just like anything, when you take it to a mechanic, there's always, well, we need to add this additional part or something like that. So I wanted to make sure that we had enough to accomplish the repair without having to come back for an additional request.
And I'm sure they'll ask you if hey, by the way, you're low on wiper fluid too, or something like that. I'm sure they'll say that.
They still do.
Yeah. What's the turnaround on this after you get it up to Modesto? How long until we get it back?
It's going to take some time. The part has to be manufactured at Pierce factory in Wisconsin.
Okay.
And then there's the manufacturing time, the ship time out, and they believe 1 to 2 weeks once all the parts are received to have it back in service and back to us.
Okay, and during that 1 to 2 weeks when we don't have this particular truck, we're still covered. We're working with other places in the county.
Yeah, we have automatic aid agreements with the surrounding communities. So
Okay.
one of the highest priorities with this is the only ladder truck on the coast. The next closest one is coming from either San Luis Obispo or from Atascadero.
Okay.
So we have agreements to get those in, and we dispatch them upon the initial dispatch if we know there's a need for them. But there is that lag time to have them travel here.
Yeah, that's good, because the community definitely needs to know that. So
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
My questions had more to do with process and keeping a piece of mission-critical equipment ready to go. It seems like with a piece of equipment like this, you shouldn't have to wait for a CFAC meeting 3 months from now in order to get approval, so you go to the city council to get approval. I think that's we got to fix that. There are a couple other budgeting concepts that concern me. One is that if it's an expectation over time that we're going to be responsible for major vehicle repairs that aren't going to be funded out of the vehicle replacement fund, then we need a reserve to do that. I don't have any problem with this repair conceptually. I do have a problem with it being funded out of E. I think this is exactly the kind of thing you fund out of the general fund reserve. I think it's exactly the kind of thing you pull out of the vehicle replacement fund. It's not something you can absorb in your operational budget. So on those two grounds, I want to make it clear that you need to get this fixed, and you shouldn't have needed to come to us to get it fixed because it ought to be coming out of another fund. And so while it would be easy to kind of do this one, the next one that might come along would be the Public Works Department needs a major repair on a piece of heavy equipment, and they're going to come to us because it was an unbudgeted item. So my inclination is to certainly support the repair. It's got to be done, but I'm not quite sure I want to support it being funded out of Q&E and not setting a precedent for that purpose. And by the city's own budget, it says that the vehicle replacement fund is fully funded and there isn't a shortfall there. So I know there's that E may look like an easy target because there's a balance there, but I think there's a longer term implication, and there are probably funds available elsewhere.
Understood.
I had the very same question without understanding where allocations come in different ways. My question, of course, I want you to have whatever you want, but my question is, let's say we're not available for that. Do you have emergency? What is the process? How does someone get that? I'm not knowledgeable. I feel a little in a poor position to even have a voice on the vote, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
But that's exactly my thought is, what are the mechanisms? Are we it?
So if I may speak to that, with the pump repair, we had taken that to finance, and their recommendation was to take that to city council for a budget adjustment, a budget amendment, and then just allocate that into our repair fund. That happened last fiscal year. With this, due to the timing of it, the recommendation was to bring it to CFAC, that this might be the appropriate venue to address that. I can turn over to finance if there's any more nuances to that.
Chief McCrane contacted me and let me know about this needed repair, and it was just, timing was just perfect to make it onto this agenda just ahead of this meeting. I also, that thought came to mind as well because these funds are for safety, and this is a safety issue. We absolutely could fund it out of the vehicle replacement fund, and that would be appropriate.
It seems to me that we have 2 council meetings every month. You can get on that agenda within a short notice, and so your apparatus is up and running and it's safe for the people that use it. So is really there an issue of funding this out of current city vehicle replacement, reserves, something like that? Emily, was there some reason for pulling it out of Q&E?
Purely timing and appropriateness of the expenditure, matching the ballot measures.
Do you see this as setting, again, we're having to come here and then go to council later on.
Mm-hmm.
Does this set any sort of precedent in your mind for funding other sort of major repairs other than personnel and capital and that sort of thing? I'm kind of worried about kind of expanding the size of that milkshake.
There's no precedent setting that I would be concerned with. At the time of budget development, I recall this body stating that they want to keep some money back just in case something came up and more funding was needed. So to me, this fit that category, and I recommended to Chief McCrane that we bring it to you for consideration.
Okay.
However, there's the other fund is perfectly appropriate for this expenditure as well.
Okay.
If we had to wait another 8 weeks for a CFAC meeting, I would not have recommended to Chief McCrane that he just wait on that repair.
In the short term, is there an advantage of pulling it out of Q&E other than not tapping into vehicle replacement?
No, there is not.
Okay. Committee members?
There's no pressure here. It was a
Yeah, I'm just confused that if we're having a conversation about the funding that we're overseeing, but it's not necessarily really need to come out of that funding, but yet it's an emergency. I mean, I want to do the right thing, but I don't even know where it's supposed to be allocated from. I feel, like I said, I feel like I don't have enough understanding of what would normally happen if we want him to have his ladder fixed. I do. So who's going to pay for that?
Either funding source is appropriate. They're both technically general funds. And so the distinction is just that these are ballot measures. This body has been particularly concerned with being true to those ballot measures. And so as a safety issue, I thought this body would like to see this expense and have an opportunity to fund it.
So it's a question of whether it does fall under Q&E? Is that?
No, that's not in question. It
Okay.
certainly does fall under
Oh, okay.
Q&E's intended purposes.
I think for me, it is certainly a safety issue. We probably bought the fire truck from Q&E or part of it, or one other fire truck. Question for me is, are we getting involved in vehicle replacement or major repairs? Because we've never done that before. That's a whole other category, and I don't want other department heads licking their chops that all of a sudden, if they can't get it out of one fund, then there's always this other fund over here. And in my budgeting mind, it means we need to consider that as a reserve item, a reserve for repairs that come up in the middle of the year. And I think that just sort of sets up a whole other vehicle replacement fund that's kind of off book, rather than having the city do this on a comprehensive, integrated way. Because the departments get charged for this stuff. They get money pulled out of their budget to fund that. If a repair is needed for that, and if it isn't, let me know, then that's the appropriate funding source for it. There may be other ways where we can augment the fire department's budget, but this is more of the amount of the money is not important. The precedent that it's maybe setting is more important. Do you want to make a motion, Michael?
Good, now my mic's on, good. Yeah, I mean, and I appreciate all the comments on that, because, and I happen to agree with a lot of them. At this point, because of the uniqueness of this particular truck, when I look at vehicle repair, I kind of look at an object like this as a little different than vehicle repair in my world, in how I view things, because of the particular use of this. I'm willing to put on here a motion to support the staff recommendation on this, with a caveat that it goes before the city council, explaining that there are other funding sources available to this vehicle repair fund as well, and for the council to weigh this in their deliberations where they would like this to come from, but still go ahead and support staff recommendation here today. And then obviously let the council, decide where they'd like to go with something like this. But either way, no matter what it is, we've got to take care of this for you. Absolutely. And I don't think anybody in this room questions that. It's not anything. So that would be my motion on the table at this point.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. For the sake of discussion, Michael, would you agree to addition to that motion to make this on a non-precedent setting and have staff explain some of the discussion we've had today about setting a precedent for other future?
Of course, yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
right,
You're
okay.
absolutely right.
Okay, right. With that,
Scott, is there a way to look at it as there's normal maintenance and then this would be some kind of unusual? In other words, it's not part of what they perceive as, or what they've expected in their maintenance program. Maybe it's a different category of maintenance.
and I think my point is that that's what the vehicle replacement fund is for. The stuff that's sort of above and beyond, when a truck is completely used up, you go to the fund, you fund it from there.
Okay.
So there's a sinking fund that's available for something like this. So with that motion amendment, I'll support that motion. And would the clerk call the roll?
Vice Chair Woody,
Yes.
Member Johnson,
Yes.
Member Dorfman? Yes. And Chair Peck?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you very much.
We're almost on time, Emily.
We're doing great.
Future agenda items, Director Conrad, can you provide us with kind of a, I guess, a recap of what you covered at the top of the meeting?
Absolutely. So to recap, some potential items would be bringing you the, assuming it's ready, the development impact fee nexus study and fee update draft. An update for you on the citywide and harbor capital needs assessment status. There's a potential item from Public Works on the SRF WRF loan amendment financial strategy, and also a discussion on how this body would like to approach and how finance would like you to approach budget development in terms of timing and planning for future year budgets.
Thank you.
And this is the October meeting? October
Yes.
meeting.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, you won't be at.
I will be here.
You miss all the fun.
Our next meeting is October 15th, as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting. I won't be here, but I will, because of the importance of the items, I'll probably be providing some agenda correspondence ahead of time. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second to that motion?
Yes, I'll.
Okay. All in favor, say aye. We won't take a vote on. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
So we're adjourned at 4:47.
Yeah, we're gonna,